Can J.J. Abrams really be called a director? Or is a more accurate term to describe what he does, maybe a better term would be rehasher or remaker? Because it seems that that's all he does nowadays, whether it's the Star Trek franchise or most recently with the Star Wars franchise. J.J. Abrams seems to be the master of rehashing old franchises to make tons of fucking money because a handful of corporate Hollywood studio executives said, we gotta make some money, let's pump this shit out to the masses. A lot of people have come to realize that there are some disturbing similarities between Star Wars The Force Awakens Episode 7 and Star Wars A New Hope Episode 4, the original one that came out in 1977. The similarities are so shocking that even J.J. Abrams yesterday had to respond to criticisms on why they're so fucking similar. Because people are starting to feel ripped off. As the hype settles down and people start to use their rational brains again, they realize that they just paid for little more than a repolished version of the original Star Wars. And of course, in response to criticisms, J.J. Abrams gave the most disjointed, discombobulated, he almost sounds nervous in the quoting. There's no video of it, but in the quote, it almost sounds like somebody desperately trying to rationalize. He sounds so disjointed. So here's what J.J. Abrams said. It's kind of lengthy, so I'll read it quickly, but I think it gets the point. J.J. Abrams says, it was obviously a wildly intentional thing that we go backwards in some ways to go forwards in the important ways, given that Star Wars is kind of specific, gorgeous concoction of George Lucas that combines all sorts of things. Ultimately, the structure of Star Wars itself is as classic and tried and true as you can get. It was itself derivative of all these things that George loved so much, from the most obvious Flash Gordon and Joseph Campbell to the Akira Kurosawa references to westerns. I mean, all of these elements were part of what made Star Wars. I can understand that someone might say, oh, it's a complete ripoff. We inherited Star Wars. The story of history repeating itself was, I believe, an obvious and intentional thing. And the structure of meeting a character who comes from a nowhere desert and discovers that she has a power within her, where the bad guys have a weapon that is destructive, but that ends up being destroyed, the Death Star, otherwise known as the Star Killer in the new one. How pathetic, how uncreative. The Star Killer. The Death Star, the Star Killer. I mean, just absolute creative vision there, JJ. Those simple tenets are by far the least important aspects of this movie, and they provide bones that were well proven long before they were used in Star Wars. So basically what he just said, and there's more to his quote, it gets more discombobulated. What he just said was that, yeah, Star Wars The Force Awakens is a complete ripoff. Like, he didn't even try to say it wasn't. Like, yeah, of course. I mean, George Lucas, in his original Star Wars, it used such fundamental archetypes in film and storytelling that why not just rehash it all over again? It gets worse. He continues. What was important for me was introducing brand new characters using relationships that were embracing the history that we know to tell a story that is new. To go backwards, to go forwards. So I understand that this movie, I would argue much more than the ones that follow, we hope so, JJ, needed to take a couple steps backwards into very familiar terrain and using a structure of nobodies because somebody's defeating the baddies, which is, again, I would argue, not a brand new concept, admittedly, but use that to do, I think, a far more important thing, which is introduce this young woman who's a character we've not seen before and who has a story we have not seen before. Well, actually, she's Luke Skywalker. Well, actually, that's not entirely true because Luke Skywalker actually had to work to attain his skills. Rey apparently just has it because female empowerment. Which is introduced this young woman who's a character we've not seen before and who has a story we have not seen before, meeting the first stormtrooper we've ever seen who we get to know as a human being. To see the two of them have an adventure in a way that no one has had yet, with Han Solo. Well, Han Solo's dead, so no, he won't be in the next films. To see those characters go to find someone who is a brand new character who, yes, may be diminutive, but is as far from Yoda as I think a description of a character can get, who gets to enlighten almost the way of a wonderful older teacher or grandparent or great aunt might, something that is confirming a kind of belief system that is rejected by the main character, and to tell a story of being a parent and being a child and the struggles that entails. Clearly, Star Wars has always been a familial story, but never in the way that we've told here. Very important stuff. I'm going to go back to that in a moment, but this is the very end of his quote. And yes, that they destroy a weapon at the end of this movie, but then the Star Killer, otherwise known as the revamped version of the Death Star. But at the end of this movie, but then something else happens, which is, I think, far more critical and far more important. I think that even in that moment when that is happening, the thing I think the audience is focused on and cares about is that big planet going to blow up, because we all know it's going to blow up. What you really care about is what's going to happen in the forest between these two characters who are now alone. Yeah, I guess people must have been excited about what's going to happen between Rey and Kylo. Unfortunately, because Rey is so overpowered, there was no real tension. She just whooped his ass and made him look like a pathetic loser. But basically what JJ just said here is that, yes, we took a bunch of old concepts. We basically rehashed the original Star Wars because, hey, George Lucas was originally just rehashing a bunch of archetypes. So we might as well do it as well because, hey, it makes good storytelling. Don't innovate. Don't do anything new. And but then he actually mentions what the new features are. He mentions what the new storytelling elements. And according to him, he goes, but use that to do, I think, a far more important thing, which is introduce this young woman who's a character we've not seen before and who has a story we have not seen before. So he's arguing that Rey's character is one of the new things in this giant rehashing, which is wonderful. Okay, whatever. And then meeting the first stormtrooper we ever seen to get to know as a human being. So two new elements from the new film is Rey and a stormtrooper. And of course, it's not a coincidence that Rey is a female and the stormtrooper, Finn, is black. And honestly, it seems like the only real differences in this new Star Wars movie is that it's a politically correct repackaged version with a female and a black guy. I think that is literally the extent of J.J. Abrams' creative vision when it comes to this film. The only new things he's done is he made the main protagonist a female and the co-main protagonist a black dude. Congratulations. And he even goes on to say, he references the Yoda character. There's even a Yoda character in this fucking movie. At the cantina, the new cantina in the new film, because they basically copied the cantina scene from A New Hope and inserted into Star Wars The Force Awakens. At the cantina scene, they meet this little fucking midget creature who gives advice and is very knowledgeable. And of course, the midget creature is basically the new Yoda, and this midget creature is a fucking female. J.J. Abrams has done nothing new. And he says, to those characters, to go find someone who is a brand new character, who, yes, he's talking about this new Yoda, this female Yoda, who, yes, may be diminutive, but is as far from Yoda as I think a description of a character can get. Why? Why is this new Yoda character, which, as you admit, is diminutive of the original Yoda character, but you say is as far from Yoda as I think a description of a character can get? Why? Because this new Yoda has a fucking vagina instead of a little fucking green goblin penis? I mean, this is it? I mean, what more proof do you want that all J.J. Abrams did was repackage the old fucking Star Wars in a politically correct sense for a modern age? This is the essence of a corporate ripoff. I take offense to corporate ripoffs because it's not an inspired piece of work. Okay? Guarantee you that the inspiration to make The Force Awakens didn't come from some true artistic genius who had a sudden spark of inspiration one day and felt passionately compelled internally to create this work of art. I guarantee you that the Force Awakens was hatched in a fucking corporate boardroom with a bunch of Hollywood movie studio executives sitting around the table in their fucking constricting fucking, suits and shit, their professional suits, thinking, how can we recreate the creative genius that was the original Star Wars? How can we take that original story and re-engineer the hype of the original ones? And they said, okay, let's get the master of doing remakes nowadays, J.J. Abrams, and we're going to get him and we're going to have him do another. And this is the fucking trend in Hollywood today. All you see now in Hollywood are fucking remakes. Notice how so many movies today are remakes. They're resurging old franchises and putting them out there again in just these recycled and blatantly rehashed ways. Fucking ripoff. Okay? Money matters, right? You gotta have money to survive. But money should not be the motivation for doing everything. And too many of these movies that are being remade now, the reason that they're being remade is because no one has any creative talent anymore. There is creative bankruptcy in Hollywood right now. Creative bankruptcy to the point where they just have to take old franchises and pump them out again. So, I don't know. It's just disgusting. It's so obvious that the new Star Wars franchise, which a lot of people are freaking out, they think it's so amazing, is just a fucking money-grabbing scheme. And, it's pathetic that people get sucked into the hype like that. But I think there is a case to be made that The Force Awakens is one of the worst Star Wars films. Was it enjoyable? Yeah, it was enjoyable because it copied all the key archetypes from the original Star Wars. In that sense, it was an enjoyable film. But if you look at it for what it is, a complete fucking ripoff. Because if you put your money down to watch A New Hope all over again with a little bit, some better CGI, you were ripped off. There's nothing to admire here if it's just a rehash of an old classic film. And in that sense, it's a terrible film. It's a terrible film because it didn't do anything new. It had to copy. If anybody else did this, they'd be fucking charged with a crime for, infringing on copyrights. Luckily, Disney bought all the fucking rights to Star Wars, so now they can just rehash forever and then make fucking new amusement park rides to sell tickets. It's a joke. And it's a politically correct joke, at best. So, ridiculous. Fight back against YouTube censorship by supporting me on Patreon. You'll also get access to exclusive, never-before-seen videos and other perks like monthly Google Hangouts with me, free books and t-shirts, and more.